last time, about a week.
I just
Oh, really?
Just listen to see. Some should be done.
what we call almost
I guess that's kind of a separate issue.
He'll be down in his case. Is your case gonna be heard? Yeah, it'll be heard, so if he's not gonna
still start.
Yes, sir.
Good morning, how are you doing? You speak, you speak.
And you use the okay. Yes, okay. Well, I'm in the barn. I'm Rocky.
you?
Yes.
Are you Mr. Davis?
Yes, sir.
I'm Cecil Godwin.
Hey,
I just
Mr.
wanted to say
Godwin.
hello. How are you?
Yeah, doing all right.
Thank you for your help today.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
First one up.
You are.
All right.
Yeah, this makes it easier on everyone, including myself.
Yes, well, we're happy to be here. We've got a lot of folks. We know we're limited to 10 minutes.
10 minutes.
And so
total.
we put our card in, so we're each going to speak for 1 to 2 minutes at the most. And there's no more
However
than 5
you want
of
to
us.
split it up.
Right.
How you
We're
want
just,
to.
we're going to talk about different things, but basically we're going to go our perspective on the points you made. Traffic, safety, it's commercial, it's not residential, it's not ag. What is it now? Is it ag conservation or conservation ag? Which should I call it?
Conservation agriculture is the name.
That's what I want to know.
technically. Yeah.
Thank you.
If each person can just focus on different points,
That's what we're
that'll
doing.
maximize your time.
You're talking about this, you're talking about this, you're talking about this, you're talking about that. We're not being repetitive.
All
Our
right.
goal is to be on time and not be repetitive.
Sounds good.
Scheduled meeting of February 23rd, 2022. My name is Tim Rainey. I'm chairman of the board. Mr. Brett Ragsdale serves as the secretary of the board. Mr. Ragsdale, make it a roll call, please.
Yes, sir. Ms. Baker?
Here.
Mr. Claybrook?
Here.
Mr. Jackson?
Here.
Mr. Malazri?
Here.
Ms. Skurlock?
Here.
And Chair Rainey.
Here.
We have a quorum.
All right, thank you. The Memphis and Shelby County Board of Adjustment is the oldest appointed governmental body in Memphis and Shelby County. We were established in 1925. The board hears appeals from the administration of the zoning ordinances, requests for variances from the zoning ordinance, and other requests articulated by local zoning laws adopted pursuant to our enabling legislation. The 8 members of the board are appointed, 4 by the mayor of Memphis and 4 by the mayor of Shelby County, with confirmation by the Memphis City Council or Shelby County Board of Commissioners. We serve without remuneration. At this time, I would like to swear in the staff. You may remain seated. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? All right, thank you. May I get a motion to approve the minutes from last month's meeting?
So moved.
Second.
All right, moved and second. Is there any discussion of the minutes? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving the minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. Mr. Secretary, please provide us a secretary's report, if there is one this month, and then explain the procedure for today's meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have a secretary's report, so I'll go into the procedures. The procedure for this meeting will be as follows. I will introduce each case as listed on the agenda. Copies of the agenda can be found at the front podium, next to the right side podium. For each case, staff with the Division of Planning and Development will give a presentation that will contain site plans, photographs, and maps of the subject property. At the conclusion of staff presentation, the applicant will present his or her case. After the applicant's presentation, the board will hear first from those speakers in support of the application, then from those speakers in opposition of the application, and then finally, the applicant will have an opportunity to provide rebuttal. All parties who wish to provide testimony to the board will be sworn in by the chairman. If a member of the audience wishes to provide testimony in support or in opposition to a particular case on today's agenda, he or she will need to fill out a speaker's card for the record. Speakers' cards are available at the front center podium as well. We don't need speakers' cards from the applicants since their names are already part of the record. After all parties have been heard, the board will close the public hearing, make a motion, and then deliberate on the case. Pursuant to the board's rules of procedures, the time allotted for speakers will be as follows. The applicant has 5 minutes to present his or her case. The applicant may reserve unused time for his or her rebuttal. Those speaking in support of the application have 5 minutes. This 5 minutes is the total time allotted for support testimony regardless of the number of speakers. Those speaking in opposition of the application have 10 minutes. This 10 minutes is the total time allotted for opposition testimony regardless of the number of speakers. The applicant has 2 minutes for rebuttal in addition to any unused time from his or her presentation time. These times do not include time for questions from and answers to members of the board. The chairman may provide additional time provided both sides are given an equal amount of additional time. The applicant or any speaker if the applicant or any speaker would like to be heard after the conclusion of the public hearing, or if a board member wishes to hear additional testimony from any party, a 2/3 vote is required to reopen the public hearing, pursuant to the board's rules of procedures. Please note that once the public hearing is reopened, both the applicant and opposition will be allowed to provide additional testimony and/or rebuttal. All motions made by this board will be made in the affirmative. The private acts governing the board require the affirmative vote of at least 5 members to approve an application, regardless of the number of board members present. The board may also vote to hold an application for a period not to exceed 90 days with the consent of the applicant, or 30 days without the consent of, 90 days with the consent of the applicant, or 30 days without the consent of the applicant. All section numbers that we refer to come from the Memphis and Shelby County Unified Development Code, or the UDC, which was adopted by the Memphis City Council and Shelby County Board of Commissioners in August of 2010 and became effective on January 1st, 2011. I will introduce the entire UDC and make it part of today's record, thus dispensing with the reading of individual sections. The board is vested by the power to act on these cases before us today under the provisions of Chapter 9.22 of the UDC. Mr. Chairman, I submit that all cases have been filed in proper order, all applicants have been notified of this hearing, and all notice requirements have been fulfilled as required by the UDC.
All right, thank you, Mr. Secretary. At this point, the board will establish a consent agenda. To establish the consent agenda, the Secretary will call out each eligible case. If any member of the audience, staff, or board member objects to a case being placed on the consent agenda, he or she should do so by a show of hands when the Secretary reads that case. Once the consent agenda is established, the board will vote on all cases placed on the consent agenda as a whole and will not hold individual public hearings on each case. Mr. Secretary, which items on our agenda are eligible for consent this week?
Item number 2, BOA 21-156, 2673 Yale Avenue. Item number 5, consent as a whole, BOA 22-002, 1956 Dunn Avenue. Item number 6, BOA 22-003, 3860 Eaglewood Drive. Item number 7, BOA 22-004, 6329 Mason Privy Cove. Item number 9, BOA 22-013, 200 East Chickasaw Parkway. Item number 10 as a whole, BOA 22-014, 2381 Park Avenue. Item number 11, BOA 22-016, 2380 Forest Avenue.
Mr. Chairman, I believe, Mr. Ragsdale, did you read out item number 3 as a hold, as consent item?
I don't believe I did.
Oh, okay. I thought you did. I was just making sure. Okay, you did not. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I'll remind everyone that if you're being placed on consent, you're agreeing to the conditions placed in the staff report if you're approved. So with that, would someone like to give us a motion to approve item number 2, 5 as a hold, 6, 7, 9, 10 as a hold, and 11?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
I'm going to remind the board as they vote on these cases that they are saying they've read the staff reports and in full agreement with the staff's report. Mr. Ragsdale, will you give us a roll call, please?
Ms. Scurlock. Mr. Milazari,
Yes.
Mr. Jackson,
Yes.
Mr. Claybrook,
Yes.
Ms. Baker,
Yes.
Chairman Rainey.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, if you're here for cases 2, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, or 11, you've just been approved or held as requested, and so you don't have to stick around for the rest of the meeting unless you want to. One point of order, I think, so I was just going to ask the board, we have agenda item number 12 is a request for a rehearing. So I think we've all read through that. If we want to have a hearing on the rehearing, we'll leave it where it is. If there's no discussion on it and y'all just want to vote or something, we can go ahead and disperse with that one.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'd like to have a discussion on that
Okay, then we'll
item.
just leave it where it is. I was going to give that option.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Mr. Ragsdale, will you call our first case we're going to hear today?
Item number 1, BOA 21-127, 9334 Walnut Grove Road.
All right, see Mr. Davis. Is the applicant here? Right there. Is there any opposition here for case number 1? Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Davis, will you give us a staff report on this case, please? Thank you.
Yes, sir. Gonna wait for the slideshow. There we go. All right, this is case BOA 21-127. It is a request for a variance. This was on the agenda 2 months ago and held for 2 months at the applicant's request. Some general information. The location of the parcel is 9334 Walnut Grove. This is in the county, unincorporated county. The owner and applicant is Mr. Braden Walker of Lawn Enforcement, Inc., represented today by Mr. Job of Glankler Brown. The request is a variance from section 2.7.4. That's our section that deals with accessory home occupations, to permit the following as an accessory home occupation. Number 1, a landscaping business dispatch center, meaning where employees come to the site and are dispatched to other locations, so coming in the morning, returning in the afternoon. And number 2, the outdoor storage of landscaping business materials, including flammable liquids, in this case, gasoline. So let me discuss that just for a moment. Accessory home occupations are allowed. It's meant to give people the freedom and the right to do certain sorts of business from their own home. For example, a home office, or maybe a one-chair barber salon, cutting hair, things like that. We do have several standards related to home occupations. For example, you can't have any signage, anything that would detract from the residential aesthetic and nature of that house. It can't take up more than a quarter of the area of the house. It is meant to be entirely indoors. And we also have several types of businesses or operations that are not allowed as accessory home occupations. For example, a real estate office or a child care center with 5 or more children. We also require that if you are operating an accessory home occupation, that all workers live in that house and that there's no more than one customer visiting at a time. Dispatch centers are specifically prohibited. In terms of the second part of the request, outdoor storage of landscaping business materials, the code allows you to have outdoor storage of certain business materials, it says, without defining it, associated with a landscaping business. If your lot has an area of at least 4 acres, it does specify that flammable liquids, no matter the size, and bulk storage are never permitted as part of an accessory home occupation. This area of the lot is 4 acres. So disregarding the flammable liquids, the outdoor storage of certain business materials would be allowed. However, those 4 acres include a prescriptive easement. What is a prescriptive easement? Basically, if you look at the deed, it includes the northern half of Walnut Grove. That land was never formally dedicated to the county, and an easement was never overlaid over it, ensuring access to the public. However, it's such an established thoroughfare that the owner of that land has no legal right to block access. So it's a prescriptive easement. It might as well be right of way. And one of our conditions of approval, if approved, that we're recommending is to require the dedication of that prescriptive easement to the county, which is a standard requirement, bringing the area of the parcel under 4 acres. So that explains the 2 parts of the request. And the zoning of this parcel is conservation agriculture. All right, so again, east of Shelby Farms Park in unincorporated Shelby County, Rocky Point neighborhood is where we're looking. This land was de-annexed from the city on the first day of 2021. Here's a satellite photograph of the site. So we see in the front the house, and then in the rear the landscaping business operations, more or less. Land use and zoning, again, everything around here is zoned agricultural. There is a denser single-family neighborhood to the west. This land use designation map is colorized by the assessor of property, so it is telling us how property owners are, what sorts of property taxes people are paying. Yellow is, of course, single-family residential. So it's mostly residential. It's all zoned agricultural. Also, while I have this map up, something I pointed out in the staff report is that this property is located at a bend, between 2 bends in the road on Walnut Grove. To the west, we see that bend right where that neighborhood ends, and then to the east, we see another bend. It does have limited site visibility coming in and out of that driveway, as I've personally experienced on my site visit. We have some drone photographs provided by the applicant. These are great. Mr. Ragsdale, if we want to invest in a drone camera, it's just something to consider. So here's the house looking over Walnut Grove with a circular driveway. Here is that circular driveway. It's unclear if this was permitted. I think that a circular driveway would be permitted, but each ingress point would have to be 20 feet from each other. Another view of that house. And here's the backyard, a shop. We have employee parking on that east right side and the foreground, and then in the background we have storage of heavier vehicles as well as mulch, etc. On the left is a garden. That's personal, to my understanding. Here's just another view of that storage and parking. And another view. Here is a site plan generated by the applicant. Credit to Mr. Job. So this just sort of shows us what we were seeing in those photographs. Again, the house up front with that circular driveway, and then parking for employees in the back, as well as storage of materials, mulch, etc. It does point out where those gasoline tanks are, and if you look at this photo, that structure to the bottom right is containing those 2 gasoline, or I believe there are 2 gasoline holders. Okay, so in conclusion, this is a request to permit those 2 variances from those standards I mentioned. As you know, variances are meant to provide relief from the code when there's an exceptional physical situation on a property that warrants it, because having to follow that would result in an undue hardship or practical difficulty. We do require that applicants provide responses to the variance criteria when submitting a variance application. In this case, the applicant argued that the heavy wooded areas adjacent to the site were an exceptional physical characteristic. Those responses are on pages 21 and 22 of your staff report. We disagree that is exceptional in the agricultural zoning district, and we also fail to see how this characteristic creates a practical difficulty or undue hardship in following these 2 aspects of the accessory home occupation standards. Furthermore, variances are required to be in harmony with the intent of the code, and we find that standard is not met of this request, simply because it's not accessory to the residence. And for what has been requested to count this as an accessory occupation, we feel that it is not clearly incidental to the residence, attracts far more daily visitors than would be expected of a house, and that it does detract from the neighborhood's residential/agricultural character. As examples of evidence of this, the dumpster, which was shown on the site plan, and the 10-plus employee parking spaces are what we're calling out. And again, as I mentioned, this might be detrimental to safety, which is, again, would violate one of the variance criteria. And that's because of those two bends in the road that I pointed out. Having this degree of traffic without considering a rezoning, et cetera, on the two-lane Walnut Grove could be a road hazard. And that concludes my presentation. We are recommending rejection. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Are there any questions of staff before we move on? Ms. Trask.
Yes, I have one, and might be better toward the end. Did you mention that rezoning is an option versus the request for the adjustment?
Well, that's not what's been requested. I mean, it would take a little more thought, again, because this is a residence. So, if the request were to consider this as two principal uses, that might be a different type of variance request. It might be something that could go to the county commission. But that's not what we considered today.
Right.
I will point out that in 2014, I believe, when this was still in the city, a special use permit, which is sort of like a rezoning, was applied for a doggy daycare, and that was rejected by the city council then.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
I'm looking at the aerial map to the east. It looks like there's been a lot of dirt moved. I'm just trying to, do we know what's going on next door there?
Yeah, so that property is owned, I believe, 2/3 stake by the owner of the subject property.
Okay.
It was recently deforested. I believe that some complaints have been made, but that property is not part of this this variance request. So we're not considering that today. But I do believe that Mr. Renner, resident tree removal permit guru, is onto it if permits were not sought. But I'm not totally sure about that.
All right, Mr. Davis, you mentioned the doggy daycare application in 2014. That was a different applicant, though, wasn't it? Okay, just making sure.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any other questions before we move forward? Let the record show also that Vice Chair Savage Towns has joined us. All right, if the applicant will come up. And then I don't have any other cards for support, so that would give y'all 10 minutes, the 2 5s combined.
Great. My name is Mark Jobe. Thank you for listening to us today. I believe they summarized a lot of the application, but we disagree with some of the analysis and appreciate y'all being willing to listen to this request. The key here, from our perspective, is that Mr. Walker purchased this property 5 or so years ago and has been operating in this manner with the knowledge of code enforcement and other officials. It's not been a covert operation, despite the fact that it's wooded and you can't see this activity on 9334 from the street. He was doing this under the understanding that the use was permitted in the agricultural district, both on the home occupation exception, which allows storage of, quote, certain landscaping business materials on lots 4 acres or larger. That's not specific to agricultural zoning. However, the conservation zoning category is an open use category, which allows principal uses such as commercial fishing, apiary, livestock auction, milk processing plant, plant nursery, poultry slaughtering and dressing. along with the fact that there is this exception for 4-acre lots that are 4 acres being allowed to store landscape business materials, to the applicant, it is contradictory to then not allow them to use it, or the idea that only one person can go to and from and get those materials to use in the commercial setting. So the underlying zoning is very important because most of the objections seem to circle around it being a residential area. But it is zoned conservation agriculture, and commercial uses are allowed that are more intense than the storage of commercial landscaping business materials and the like. And that's what he's been doing for a number of years. It wasn't until recently, this fall, when he received a courtesy citation and, from his perspective, realized that the county, city officials had changed their position as to the acceptability of what he was doing. And on a related note, he does own 2/3 interest in the adjacent property. All of this property, from my understanding, I just learned this a couple days ago, used to be a gravel pit or mine. I think that is important and would have been included in my application or our application had I been aware of that. So this, despite the tree growth and the natural look, at one point it was a gravel pit and mine, and what he's doing on the adjacent tract is not in furtherance of expanding the commercial operations, but rather he is flattening it, trying to get rid of snakes, mosquitoes, and the dirt and rubble, trash and rubble that was all over the adjacent tract. But again, that's not subject to this application, but that's what is going on there, and he has a prime contractor doing that work, and he believes he has followed all permitting requirements, although just based on communications, there's some question about that, but I don't think that's for today's proceedings. I've got Braden here. He's happy to answer any questions and speak to this more. I know that's important because he's operating the business, but again, he does not view this as a detrimental use and does not believe he's been harming the community for the past 4 or 5 years as he's been doing this. He's made the property better, and it's important to note that the 4-acre tract was also part of the mining operation, and the tract to the left also has heavy debris and trash, and this isn't a residential area within the city limits. It's zoned conservation agriculture, which was formerly the agricultural zoning, and he was under the understanding that this was an allowed use based on his communication with code over the past few years, and it is not until recently when he started improving the adjacent tract, which he's going to sod and then plant 80 trees, replant the trees now that he's got it to where it's acceptable, and that will be more to service his home and allow him to enjoy that property. So the concern that that's being expanded to create some massive commercial operation is just not the case. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have for me, but that is our request would be approval with conditions. We're receptive to listening to conditions that would allow this to continue to be allowed and would be agreeable to those. But the only condition we've heard so far comes with the caveat that it may then disallow what we're requesting, and that would be the dedication of right-of-way. And I guess one more thing as far as the traffic concerns, this is zoned in a manner that these sorts of more intense uses can be used on this property by right, and this use is not contributing to the traffic problems along Walnut Grove, and would ask that not be considered as a reason to reject this, because there's tons of traffic on Walnut Grove, and it's a major thoroughfare. But here's Braden. If we can answer any questions, I know he has a few words that he'd like to say.
Okay, if you'll give your name and address for the record, Mr. Walker.
My name is Braden Walker, and I live at 9334 Walnut Road.
Okay, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you for your time this evening. And I've lived there for 5 years, and I also own a commercial building over by the airport. I've been victim to several crimes where they've taken my equipment. In this situation, I'm able to stay in business, and 10 years ago, I had 24 employees. Today, I have approximately 14, and that's busy season. Slow season, I have around 8 employees, and I am continuing to downsize. I am not looking at getting any bigger. I am not looking at expanding my company anymore. I just like to retain what I have, and like I said, I just appreciate this opportunity to plead my case.
Okay, are there any questions for Mr. Walker?
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, go ahead.
You say communications with code officials. Did you ever apply for or receive a permit?
Yes, ma'am, for the buildings.
Excuse me,
For the building in the back, building in the back, I was told before I constructed it that I could use this for my type of business because my type of business was zoned agricultural. They considered it agricultural. This happened in the code enforcement office. And like I said, I don't really have anything written, but when I came in there, I would not have built that building had I known that I couldn't store my landscaping equipment there. And another thing, you know, if anybody comes out, the pictures don't do it justice. If you look at the properties next door to me that still have their trees, if you look at the elevation differences, you look at the concrete, you look at and this is at the church that's next door. They're approximately 16 acres. They have concrete that's just exposed. They have tires that are out there. They've come over on numerous occasions and told me, look, as soon as we get the money, we want you to help us fix up our place. I have a total of 7 neighboring properties, all of which were part of the mine, other than the Birchfield family, that's across the street. And I have a letter from them stating that they appreciate what we've done. They used to own the property. They grew up riding our horses over there. They said the properties never looked better. They wrote us a letter. I have 7 neighbors that are in the immediate area around my building. I can get 6 of them to write letters. Every one of them are thrilled with what I've done. I'd love to invite anybody here over to my property and show them the process that I've done, and everything is to maintain the integrity of the property and the value of the property. I have a 15-year-old son. He loves to go fishing next door. Before, you couldn't see the lake. You couldn't go over there. There's too many water moccasins. The water moccasins were just everywhere because there was stagnant water. I have videos of it. I have pictures of it. And I have testimony from the other neighbors saying that all this was a nuisance. So I come over there and I started fixing that. And as soon as this happens, that's what has brought on this attention that has ultimately led me to court. So, but at 6 out of the 7 neighbors, I can get letters stating that they love what I'm doing. Every one of my neighbors in my immediate area I've been in contact with, except for one, and I believe one of them was the complainant. So, like I said, I know how to be a good neighbor, and I have been.
Mr. Jackson?
Mr. Walker, I have a question for you. You said that you did get a building permit.
Yes, sir.
To build the facility that we see that's there, the barn structure?
Yes, sir. I had to pull it.
In applying for that permit, did you apply for that as a barn for agriculture, or did you apply for that as a application to store your business equipment in?
I applied for that as a storage facility, just a storage barn.
Just
That's all it is.
barn.
It's a pole barn. It's not, and there's no offices in there. All it is strictly a storage building. And in fact, if any of, and like I said, if anybody wanted to come over there, the building has mostly my junk in it. A lot of the landscaping business stuff has nothing to do with that building. We have the equipment that stays on the trucks. The trucks are just parked there. And as far as the employees going in, we have iPads on each one of the trucks. They clock in and out on their iPads. they're not even inside a building. There's no need for a building. The fuel storage facilities, I just put those there as a convenience factor. I can easily remove them. It's not a problem. I want to make everybody happy, but at the same time, I don't know that that's the, you tell me. You guys are in charge.
Mr. Chairman, I have another question, if that's okay.
Yes,
Do you have customers that come to your property?
Never, no ma'am.
Mrs. Savage Towns?
And I think this may be a question for staff. What time frame was the mining operation there? Do we know?
I actually do not know. I would defer to Mr. Job if he knows.
So my contractor that did the work for me, he actually just passed this 2 weeks ago due to COVID. But he said that he remembers going back there when he was a young man, picking up gravel. So he was 76 when he passed. And I'm under I believe it was between 1950s and 1970. And from talking to the neighbors, from what I understand, the property was mined. The contractor, the person that was in charge of it, they filed bankruptcy, and when they filed bankruptcy, they didn't have to remediate the property. So all throughout the property, there's sand pits. We're constantly. We battled with quicksand. We've got all kinds of buried equipment where a tractor would die, and they would literally just bury the tractor in the property. When I went over to the property next door, I bought the property because. The disarray, I was like, look, I can at least pick up the tires and I can chain it off to where people can't come back here and illegally dump. Because there's paint containers, there's all kinds of trash and debris on the neighboring property before I started to clean it up. And I've spent almost 6 figures on cleaning that property up. And that's me being in the business. And whenever I have time, I go over there and I do small things, but it was above my pay grade, so I contracted that work out to another outside company. That outside company had several trucks in and out of there for the last year. And they were, hauling dirt out. They were hauling concrete in for backfill for different things. And at the end of the day, everything, like I said, I really, honestly, I wish that anybody on this board member would go by and take a look at my property and tell me if you think that anything I've done is contrary to the best interest of the property.
I have one more question. As far as the equipment that's being or will be stored, are you storing equipment there now, or are you intending to bring other equipment to this facility?
So this facility is strictly law enforcement. That has nothing to do with the contractor. The contractor, he hauled some sand that was in the back. He hauled that away, and the building, it has a few lawnmowers and stuff in it. We cut about 600 yards a week. So that's what our company does. I have 14 men that work for me. I ultimately feed 14 families. And at this point, I've already been in the commercial buildings. I paid $800 a month for an electric fence around my property to keep people from breaking in and stealing my equipment. I've been victim to several crimes. I have police reports, insurance claims, and it's just, in my industry, it's really hard in order to protect your equipment. You come in, your guys expect to work, and there's no equipment. All your trucks are stolen, all your equipment's stolen. Over 6-figure claims on my insurance ready to drop me.
So just to narrow my question down, there's no industrial size, like lawn, commercial equipment that will be flowing in and out, or will there be?
Not after the contractor's finished. Like I said, my contractor, he just passed, is as soon as we have about a week's worth of dry weather, they're to go in and they're to finish it up. That property is going to be completely filled. And at that point, I've already sodded around the lake. The property has changed a lot since the aerial pictures here. I didn't include drone pictures. I could have. I can bring some back, or I can email whoever needs them. But if you look at the property, I've leveled it out. It's so much better. I mean, it's so much more livable. Before, at my house, you couldn't see the lake. Now you can see the lake. I have zero intentions on developing the property. I have zero intentions on expanding my company. If anything, my company's just going to continue to downsize until we dissolve it because my son doesn't want to own it. So
How many crews are you working off, from law enforcement?
I have a total of 5 trucks. Most of the time, I'm only running 4 trucks.
Okay, so truck, trailer with just the normal kind of.
Yes, sir.
I need somebody to mow my lawn, and y'all come over
Yes, sir.
with 4 guys.
So
or
out of
whatever.
14
Okay.
guys, normally we have 3 men crews.
Okay.
And we have 5 trucks, but occasionally I'll put 5 guys on a truck and leave 1 guy off. And like I said, all the dispatch, it's done via computer anymore. We've tried just about everything that we can try in order to keep the retention down, the theft down, and this has been the only thing that's ever worked. I've been in business 5 years. My retention has been at an all-time high. I mean, theft is not an issue. The guys that work for me, they've been with me for a long time. A lot of them are recovering addicts, and they've been through programs, and they come to me, and they've been with me for years. And, I mean, this company means more to them than it does to me at this point financially. So,
Okay, are there any other questions? Ms.
Mr.
Baker?
Chairman, I don't have another question for the applicant, but at the appropriate time, I have a question for staff, so just let me know when
Okay.
would be a
Okay.
good time.
All right, Mr. Jackson?
Mr. Walker, one last question, I think, from me. The 4 acres in which you have your residence and this storage barn on, you said you've owned for about 4 or 5 years?
yes, sir.
When you came there to that 4-acre site, was it basically just flat and open space, or what was it prior? When you bought it, what was the condition of that land, that
Yeah.
4-acre tract?
Yes, sir. That area that you see there was actually that's where, so this is all secondhand information. This isn't, I can't testify to it because I don't know, I wasn't there. But the neighbors told me that that's where they had their wash plant. So what they would do.
They had their what?
They had their wash plant. So
Okay.
they would have this big, huge tub, and they would wash the gravel there. The overspills from they would sell the gravel that they're getting out, and then they would, that was a big sand area. So the entire area that you see there was 4 feet under sand, and I paid my contractor $10,000 to haul that sand over to my other lot and dump it in a hole that's over there that I've got in another area to level it out, because it was a wet weather pond, which means the only time it would hold water is in the wet weather. In the summertime, it would be full of snakes, full of mosquitoes. I've had numerous water moccasins come inside my garage, and I can't count the number of snakes. The previous tenant that rented our house, because the church owned the building before we bought it, the previous tenant that was there, her dog had basically almost died from snake bites, and that's the reason why she moved out of that house. And like I said, I can get letters, testimony to all of this, and everybody's very thankful for what I've done. And if you look at the neighboring property, you can see the exact same layout of what mine used to look like. So we moved over 1,000 loads of dirt and just sifted it around in order to fill it. But before, that was actually, it looked like a desert. I mean, it was just a big plain thing full of sand that you couldn't drive on because you would spin down to the bottom of the tires. And then there was a big, huge hole going down to the middle of my yard, which you can't see it in this picture, but we took a lot of the spoils, and put it in those holes.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other questions of the applicant? All right, y'all had 3 minutes left before we started asking questions, so you can reserve that time. At this point, Ms. Baker, do you want to ask the question to Mr. Davis or staff?
I do have a question from staff. And I know you probably said this in your report, but I don't remember for sure. Is everything not permitted about this use, or is some of it permitted, but are there some parts that throw it over into a use that's not permitted? That's my question.
Yeah, essentially, it's not permitted. At 4 acres, the outdoor storage of certain landscaping business materials is allowed, so that's what is allowed. But the dispatch center aspect of it is not allowed, and that's think that's the main use of the property commercially. To clarify just a few things that came up in discussion while I have the mic, I do want to again emphasize that although that neighboring parcel might have brought attention to Mr. Walker, that is not part of this variance request. When that building permit was issued for the shop, that had nothing to do with blessing any potential business. That was just an accessory structure building permit that was issued. And to my understanding, based on aerial photography, this land was wooded before Mr. Walker bought it, although I don't know what was going on at the ground level, so.
Mr. Chairman, I got another question for staff. So if this business was just Mr. Walker by himself, would that be permitted as a lawn care business?
Yes, so again, the property is at 4 acres, including half of Walnut Grove. And the standard for allowing outdoor storage of landscaping business materials is that you have at least 4 acres. But let's say that all of the materials were, if it were under 4 acres inside the shop and Mr. Walker was storing them in there, that would not be an issue. Or if it were 4 acres and there were certain materials being stored outside and it was just Mr. Walker with a personal business, meaning he was his own employee, that's allowed.
Thank you.
Okay. Do you have a question? Okay. All right, we're going to move on to the opposition.
Thank you.
So if the opposition will come forward, I have several people. I can call people out, or y'all may have people want to talk first. So if you have an order, that is fine, and we have a total of 10 minutes. Got it. Okay.
Thank you.
Hold on real quick. He has one question of staff real quick.
Seth, would you put up the zoning map that shows that property with the residential area around it?
Yes, sir.
That's it. Could you ask them? Point out what it is.
Yeah, okay. All right, if you'll give your name and address for the record.
My name is Dave Carlson, live at 668 Rocky Point.
Okay. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Before you start, I see Rocky Point over to the right. Is your property on this map, or is it further up? I know Rocky Point goes all the way to, Sanga.
It's further up.
Okay. Oh, all right. Thank you.
Yes, so
all
it's
right.
not pictured in that.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
Yep, live right on Rocky Point. Good afternoon. My name is Dave Carlson. My family and I reside at 668 Rocky Point. First, I want to thank you guys for allowing me the opportunity to speak to you today, and thank you guys also as well for volunteering to be on this particularly important board. I'm here to speak about road safety. Anybody that's traveled that section of Walnut Grove in question knows how dangerous it is. I believe it's the only section of Walnut Grove that is 2-lane and twisty. There are several schools in the area, including Cordova Elementary, Cordova Middle, First Assembly, Briarcrest, not to forget Cordova High School. All of these schools put pressure on that section of road early in the morning and in the afternoons. My wife, Susie, couldn't be here today. She's a librarian at White Station High School, but she would tell you that she and my son were involved in a head-on collision a few hundred feet from that site in question. This is during, actually about the last time that a variance was asked for this location. And any kind of commercial activity would be a bad idea. The possibility of any other accidents such as suffered by my wife and son, I think we'd all deplore, and I think that is just a bad idea to have commercial activity like this on Walnut Grove. Please accept the staff recommendation to reject the proposal. Thank you.
All right, real quick, are there any questions for Mr. Carlson? Seeing none, thank you for joining us today, sir. All right, next up.
Caleb Reed. I live property just north of that brown area that's on the north side of the highlighted area.
Okay, will you give your address for the record?
Yes, Caleb Reed, 9123 Rocky Canyon Road.
Okay, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes, I'm speaking in opposition based on the environmental impact of something like this. I work for Helena Agri Enterprises. We're the second largest agricultural retailer and distributor in the country, and we have over almost 500 locations across the country. And when we're setting up a location, we have bulk fertilizer, bulk ag chemicals, seed treatments, fuel for our vehicles, and we supply growers, turf businesses, landscape companies. So when we're setting up a location, we try to position our locations outside of town, away from residential areas, due to the potential for environmental impact if there was any kind of spill of fuel, chemicals, anything of that nature. And anytime the town starts growing up around our location, we'll go buy 5, 10 additional acres outside of town just to keep a buffer from ourselves in a residential area. So I'm in opposition to this just based on the storage of fuel and any other chemicals that would be permitted here if there were to ever be a spill or an accident. Thank you.
Okay, are there any questions for Mr. Reed? All right, come on down. Let me guess, Ms. Pressel?
Yeah, good afternoon.
Yeah.
My name's Patricia Possel.
Oh, possible, thank you.
581 Fern Meadow Cove, Cordova, Tennessee, 38018. My parcel is nowhere on this map. I live in the River Edge neighborhood, which is just down the street a little bit and to the south.
Right. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, go ahead, Ms. Possel.
Okay. This property came to my attention because of the deforestation of the property. For you all to, I know one of the questions was, what did this property look like when the gentleman bought the property? I have aerial views of what it was prior to their purchase and to what it is today. You can see that as soon as y'all get the picture, you will find that it was, for the most part, forested. I applaud the gentleman for building a business. I love the growth of a business, but unfortunately, it's the wrong lot for this type of business, in my opinion. This is a residential area. Again, I'm adjacent and to the south. One of the reasons why my husband and I chose to live in the neighborhood that we bought our property in was because of the forest in this area. Every one of the HOAs surrounding this property all have covenants. All of those covenants say when you go to build your house on the property, you must maintain the trees as best possible. You may only remove the trees if it's where your house is actually going to be. You have to save all the other trees. In the last 2 years, many of the trees on this property have been removed to the point where we now know there's that business there. 5 years ago, nobody would have known that he was operating out of that because it still looked like the rest of us, forested. Now it's not. So that is why I would like you all to vote in opposition to this. Move the business to another place where it's commercial, light industry, something like that. But this is residential for the most part. And yes, this is zoned agricultural conservancy, which is the same as the property right behind me, which is the Wolf River Conservancy. We can't remove trees back there either. Therefore, please vote in opposition.
Okay, are there any questions for Ms. Possel? Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Greetings, my name is Andrew Mathis. I reside at 9155 Rocky Cannon Road, just to the north.
Okay, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
Thank you so much. As I say, the area, we moved there a little over 2 years ago. It's predominantly undeveloped land. There is a tremendous amount of developable land for residential property. I can tell you that if I was looking at making a significant multi-million-dollar investment in property that would lead to more high-end residential development in this area, which would lead to substantial increases in property taxes to the county and to the area, I would be very hesitant to do so with the roughshod way that this has been sort of a disregard of any zoning or rules for development that I would think are rational, sort of makes a mockery of the process. I'm all for business, but this is a residential area, which is why I live there. And this is as far from residential use as I can think of. I strongly advocate that you vote no and be concerned that this has been allowed to go on unchecked to this point in time, because it's dramatically and out of character with the positive development that other people have tried to implement in the surrounding nearby lots. Thank you all very much.
Okay, hold on 1 second. I think Mr. Jackson had a question.
Yes, sir. You said your property is north of this. Is it actually on that map anywhere? Yes or no?
No, we're not actually right on it. I just drive by it every day and I can see it visibly clear, their property right now. It is not hidden. It is not obstructed. It is a large commercial building that I can now see, as opposed to the wooded area that I could see formerly.
Okay. All right, I have one more card. All right, sir, if you'll give your name and address for the record.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Cecil Godman. I live at 9100 Rocky Cannon Road. Lived there since 2000. And the brown spot just to the adjacent, we're right above that.
Okay. Very good. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right, go ahead, Mr. Godman.
Can I ask a question of point of order?
Yeah.
I don't want to go over time. How much time do you show?
4 minutes. 4 minutes, yes, sir.
All right. I just want to make sure I stop before that time.
We appreciate that.
Thank you. Well, I want to thank the board for this. I also want to thank both the staff at the Board of Adjustment. They went through, I think, a very thorough and a very concise estimate of what we have going on here. And I've been involved with this from when the city wanted to make Rocky Point a 4-lane road to where we, back in 2003, to where this property was applied in 2014 to be a commercial center. And we have tried to not have commercial come in. We have churches. We know churches have those rights. We have not opposed those in the past. But at the same time, we tried to keep the character of the neighborhood. And I think that in Shelby County and Memphis, there's a history of that. And as a point of order, I can speak to your question that you asked in regards to the rock quarries. My dad and mom were both county agents, 1951 to 1953, and both of them knew about this as rock quarries. And to the best of my knowledge, by my dad's conversations, it was no longer being done after the mid to late 50s. So that's my best recollection of his comments to me. And he was in the agricultural landscaping business most of his life. In fact, he worked for the Department of Agriculture for 15 years. So he did understand those things. But at the same time, when you see the report that the staff put together, when you look at the aerial photos, when you look at the 30-foot by 95-foot employee parking lot that was graded and put together, and I have no doubt there was a lot of work done on this property. It's not our contention that it wasn't. I'm sure there was a lot of money put into this. But you have over 15 plus cars that have the capacity to be there. The 120 to 140 foot equipment parking that was excavated and cleared out. That could handle a tremendous number and amount of equipment, including large excavating equipment, bulldozers, etc. Whether it's going to be used for that, I don't know, but it certainly could be. And the other side of it is the comment about the garden. That could be a garden, or it could also be clearly a nursery used for landscaping if you wanted to put landscaping plants there to be used later on. And actually, one of the pieces showed a small little greenhouse that was on the side of there. So there are multiple uses for that. I'm not saying that's what they're going to be used for, but it's what they could be. You have to look at potential and commercial. That's what we're trying to do, is not have commercial come in and change the character of our neighborhood. You also look at on page 8 of the report, shows the split entrance into there. Of course, what you don't see in that aerial photo to the left is there's a commercial dumpster right there with the ability for a commercial dump truck to go in and to dump that. Right back. Yeah, right there on the left. It's in this drawing.
Right down at the bottom left.
Yes, okay. You can see it. The other side is I commute down Rocky Point Take a ride on Walnut Grove most days. I do it a lot of times at 6:30, 7:30 in the morning. It is a very crowded road, school buses, other things. And if you look at that driveway, if you're trying to come out of that drive with a pickup and a trailer, it's partially obstructed from the view of people driving to the west on Walnut Grove. If you try to come out of Rocky Point Road and you're trying to make a left at those hours, you can wait 5 to 15 minutes to make a left. There's a lot of traffic there, and I too have had a daughter that's had a wreck about 300 yards to the east of this, went off the cliff and took a 30-foot cable to pull her car back out. Luckily, she was okay. So what we are asking is that while we do want good neighbors, we do want people to take care of their property, and we recognize that good things have been done. At the same time, we want to keep the character of our neighborhood intact. And this is clearly commercial. Law enforcement has been successful, and we think this would let them move to their commercial to another spot to continue their success and have them as good neighbors in a residential community. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any questions for Mr. Godman? Hearing none. Thank you so much for coming down. All right, with that alarm was our end of the opposition. Mr. Job, if you'd like to come back, you have a total of 5 minutes, 2 rebuttal in the 3 that were reserved for rebuttal.
Sure, thank you. So a number of concerns were brought up, and I think one of the nuances here is, again, the underlying zoning. This is not a single-family residential district. This is an open-use district, which CA falls under, and this is not a single-family residential district. Commercial operations are allowed by right in conservation agricultural zoning district. What appears to have triggered this concern is the fact that there's a house on the property. If there wasn't a house on the property, the principal uses that would be allowed under 2.9.6 are not the uses that create good neighbors. But again, if this needs to be rezoned by the city or county, so be it. But the idea that this is solely a single-family residential area is just not true, and it's zoned to allow agricultural uses, some of which I certainly wouldn't want to live next to them. So what brings us here is not necessarily the use, which I would say a landscaping business is most likely an agricultural use, and I believe code has historically agreed with that based on the facts here. But because he lives on site, it becomes a home occupation. And then that tumbles down the way into the landscaping exception on 4-acre lots, et cetera. But I do think that's very important that this is in a zoning classification that is not single family or just residential. And the overlays and the subdivisions that have gone on, those are driving traffic. This is not driving the traffic or any safety concerns or hazards. I do believe that those are addressed through general road safety, but that this use, focusing on the request for the continuation of the use or approval with restrictions that get the board comfortable with the use and limitations on the landscaping business would be appropriate here, given the underlying zoning, given the exception for storage of landscaping business materials on lots more than 4 acres, et cetera. Mr. Walker does not store chemicals or fertilizer on the property. In our discussions right now, he indicated that he's willing and would take the fuel off the property, the gas above ground storage tank that has the fuel in it. This is not an environmental hazard. Again, as far as the quote deforestation, this used to be a mine. And as another reminder, the open use categories allow resource extraction as a principal use. You do now have to have a special use permit, but that was originally allowed as a matter of right under the original classification, and probably contributed to the reason why it's zoned CA instead of a residential use category. So again, we're asking for approval with conditions that allow the continued operation and minimize the impact or the negative impact that it may have, including, agreeing not to have fertilizer or damaging chemicals. He would remove the tank, and we think that conditions can be laid on this to allow the continued use, which he's been doing in good faith and belief that he's in compliance, but for the improvement work. And again, was related to the quote deforestation, he has 80 trees ready to be planted on the adjacent property. But it's improving it, and sometimes you have to tear down to build back up, and that's what he's doing here to improve the property. And if there are a set of conditions that would allow this use to continue, we would like to explore those and figure those out with the board. Do you have anything?
Yes. So I'm glad this picture's up because this is a great example. So if you look at the curves in the road, each one of those curves represent an area that there's multiple wrecks. My area that I'm in is actually at the top of the hill. So when you come out, you can see both ways. We have had 0 issues with getting in and out of our driveway. We've had 0 accidents in that one little area there, other than somebody reached down to grab their wallet and hit a telephone pole in front of my house, and I went out and I hated them. That being said, there's a church, the church over to the west side of the property. If you look at that curve is where their driveway is. And I've talked to the elders over there several times. He's always told me he's so happy that there's never been an accident that happens right there because it's so dangerous for any of his congregation. Now, there's been a few fatalities in that curve. There's been several fatalities in the other curve. And then if you look at which most of the complaints are coming from Rocky Point, if you look at the dogleg right there, that's one of the worst streets to turn off of in our city or in the county in this area.
All right, well, our time's up for that. Are there any questions of the applicant? I have a question either for y'all or for staff. So looking at the parcel, what is that strip immediately to the east side of this parcel? The real thin tax parcel?
Yeah, so that is a 20-foot right-of-way, actually. It's not a parcel. Wide enough to potentially be built out as an alley that would provide access to this undeveloped parcel to the north. You can see here is a road stub.
Gotcha, okay.
And there is one other access point off Rocky Point Road. So that is one of 3 access points to this undeveloped parcel. But right now, it is just undeveloped right-of-way. I did mention in the report, I don't know how relevant this is to the request, but Mr. Walker has put a driveway in to the adjacent property using that, on that right-of-way, and that probably is not allowed. What could be allowed is building out an alley and then having a drive off of that with two county specifications.
Okay. Are there any other questions of the applicant?
No.
All right, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
All right, I assume you guys are ready to, or are there any questions of staff we want to ask before we discuss?
I do, Mr. Chairman, whenever you get a chance.
Okay, go ahead, Ms. Baker.
I can go ahead.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, my first question is, I'm hearing from the applicant that the only reason why this is even an issue is because it's a home occupation. I'm wondering what your comments are on that.
Yeah, thanks. Most likely, no, we disagree with that. I don't have the UDC in front of me, but I believe use we would most likely classify this as would be contractor storage, which is allowed in certain commercial districts, but not by right in an agricultural zoning district.
So it doesn't have to do with the fact that it's a home occupation, that he actually lives there?
So, correct. So the variances that have been requested today would be to permit this as a home occupation, but if the house were not there and it were a principal commercial use, it would still not be allowed by right.
Okay, one other question. He also talked about all these other intensive uses that are permitted? Well, can you say what some of those are in addition to contractor storage?
So again,
No, contractor storage is not permitted.
Not permitted.
What is permitted?
Most uses, it is a very restrictive zoning district. Essentially, it is single-family houses with a large minimum lot size and other uses that are allowed in single-family districts like schools and churches, and then agriculture. Now, Mr. Job is correct that agriculture can be a very intensive use that you wouldn't want to live next to, but in terms of commercial uses, no. Generally, commercial uses are not permitted in this district.
Okay.
Jackson?
David, also, it would not allow light industrial in that use, would it?
Absolutely not. Yeah, no.
And the blue area that we see to the west of that property, the 4-acre tract, that is zoned commercial?
That is zoned agricultural. Blue is for civic, and that is the church next door.
And you got no comments back from the county engineer relative to this, correct?
No, sir. I did reach out to the county engineer, actually, to ask both about that circular driveway, which was added by the applicant, as well as about the driveway on the Reddit Road, undeveloped right-of-way to the east. They told me that they didn't have any record of permits being pulled for either one. Again, this was de-annexed just over a year ago, so it's possible the city engineer has records and I didn't talk to them about it. But my understanding is that neither of the two new drives was permitted, and that the circular driveway would be allowed if the two entry points were further apart, and that using the public right-of-way as a driveway to that eastern adjacent property would not be allowed. But you might be able to get permits to do, an alley build-out. But that's all. They didn't reach out to me otherwise.
Okay. Other questions? Ms. Travis?
Yes. And this may be a question you may not be able to answer. With the clearing, with the tree clearing, and at what point of, land clearing does it trigger an engineer's input for drainage from the property?
Yeah, so that is regulated by the UDC. On a single-family property like this that's under 10 acres, you can clear trees without a permit. So I don't want to get too caught up on the eastern neighboring property because it's not what we're considering here today. That likely would require permitting. If regrading were being done over there, it would probably require state approval, and then the removal of trees without an associated, approved plan or subdivision plat on such a big property would likely require a tree removal permit. But on the subject property, you can do that. You can remove as many trees as you want without a permit. Yeah.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Just so that I'm clear, the storage facility can be used as a storage facility, correct, on the property as it stands now? Or is it not?
So that is an accessory structure to a house. So it's like basically a big shed. And in agricultural zoning districts, we don't put area limitations on accessory structures like we do in every other zoning district. We do still have the same height limitation, which is no taller than the house. So it was permitted though, so I don't want to get into that. But essentially, it's accessory to a residential use. If a occupation were also permitted accessory to a residential use, you would be able to use either the principal structure or the accessory structure as regulated by the code as part of that occupation. But otherwise, it's for personal storage in this case.
So the case, and I'm just getting clarity to make sure I understand step by step. So the variance here, and the reason he is here is because there is a business, right? There is multiple, this is dispatch portion, I'll say it like that, of the business, which is making it.
Yeah, so there's two parts to the request. Both are variance requests from the home occupation standards. One is to allow a dispatch center, which is explicitly prohibited as a home occupation.
Okay.
And the second is to allow the outdoor storage of the business materials, of landscaping business materials, which is allowed of certain materials when you have a lot of at least 4 acres, although the gasoline storage is never allowed. And I think I explained this maybe before everybody was here, but the area of this lot is 4 acres, including a prescriptive easement that covers the northern half of Walnut Grove. So as conditioned, that would be dedicated to the county and they'd go under 4 acres, which is why we're including that second one, just to be safe.
Gotcha. So we're approving the dispatch portion. So if it were just him, not the dispatch portion and the outdoor storage of landscaping material, but if he put the equipment on the inside, that would not be an issue, correct?
The first part of the request would still be the issue there.
Okay.
So those are essentially the 2 only aspects of the business on site, and neither is allowed under the code.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I'm clear on that.
But interior storage would be less of an issue with the code, yes.
Okay, thank you.
And I know we're beating this to death. If all this stuff was located on the property next door, that's more acres and everything, he'd still need a special use permit, right? Because it's not allowed in conservation agriculture.
Yeah, so then it would be, I believe, contractor storage, which I don't think is eligible for an SUP in the permitted use table, but it could be a plan development application.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, any other questions of staff before we discuss? Seeing none, then if we could get someone to give us a motion to approve BOA 21-127 as conditioned by staff.
So moved.
Second.
All right, any discussion? Mr. Jackson?
Being a landscape architect and understanding somewhat the industry that Mr. Walker is in, by all legal rights, it's a landscape contracting company. I mean, when you look at gas storage, you look at the accessory structure, you look at the number of vehicles he's parking, you're looking at all the materials that are outside. I mean, it's no different than a contractor yard. I mean, just a fact, you know? It's an excellent idea to have your house there on it where you can monitor it and keep up with it. But a variance to allow that to take place the way it's zoned is just not acceptable. Cut it any way you want to. I mean, you can remove the flammable liquids and you still got 5 trucks, 15 employees, and they're dispatched from there, so obviously they got to come there to pick up the vehicle. Even if they went down the street to a local gas station and punched in their time, the bottom line is they're reporting to this facility, and it's a commercial operation, period. He just lives there. Like I say, it's a great idea. The zoning of the property does not allow him to do what he wants to do, or is doing now, period. I don't think the issue with traffic is a problem. The road is what it is. Can't do it there. Not according to what the zoning is. And to get a variance to create it as a home accessory occupation is a little bit large for that. That's my opinion.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Ms. Baker.
May I?
Absolutely.
Well, I listened intently to the applicant's presentation. I'm sympathetic, and I applaud his good work for cleaning up all that he's done. But I also agree with Mr. Jackson that at the bottom line of it is that this is a commercial use. And I just think that preserving Walnut Grove as a residential corridor into the future is a very important value. And it's one that will have repercussions that forever, really. And because sometimes you can just approve one commercial use and it's a seed that starts something different from growing. And so, anyway, I don't know if I said that right, but I will have to not vote for this application.
Any other comments?
I have a question for the Secretary.
Yeah, go ahead.
Secretary Ragsdale, if we do not approve this, what is the process of time for him to cease that type of operation at that location? How does that work? Because I think we should be sympathetic to the fact of the operation. And like what Member Baker said, I mean, he's done an excellent job of improving the site for what it was. Probably too much clearing in my mind on it, but nonetheless, what would be the process for him to have to vacate that site for that operation? How does that work?
Well, I mean, that's a good question, and I believe the answer is, I mean, if it's not approved, it's not allowed. So it's immediately not, he can't do it by right. Now, whether, code enforcement is going to go out there and, force him to immediately stop, I mean, we'll have to go through that process of if he continues to operate. I mean, he has the option to stop operating, which would be compliant, or continue to operate. If he continues to operate, then he can be cited, and we would go through that process. And I think that just kind of reading into a little bit of what you're maybe thinking, if this is not approved, of course, we can't condition a case that is rejected. At least I'm not aware of an instance of that. If you were thinking about a sunset, I apologize, a sunset provision to say he could operate for another 3 months or something like that. If it's not approved, I don't believe we can actually place that on this.
Okay.
So they get cited, let's say it keeps going, they get cited, environmental court. Who knows?
He could be there 5 years.
Okay. Any other discussion?
Chairman, I'd like to hear some of your wisdom, if you would.
I don't have much that y'all didn't say. I have a lot of sympathy for the applicant here. I think they've done a great job with the site. I think we get rid of gas pretty easily, things like that. It's just when I start looking at the way I can grant a variance, I can't get there. I don't think there's anything special or unique about this property that makes it where it can't be used for something else. And then the home occupation, it just isn't, because it's, he lives there, but he's got all these employees, and typically it's like, oh, I have a home office or something like that. So I'm having trouble getting there, although I really feel bad for the applicant. And so I see where you were talking about, like, well, maybe we approve it with a sunset. I don't know if that really does anything, realistically, on whether or not it's going to be enforced. Maybe it gives him the ability to, know he can work towards something. But I don't know if we're going to get backed up in a court with that, of being able to enforce it. So I didn't give you a lot of wisdom there. Other thoughts? If no other thoughts, I assume you're ready to vote. So, Mr. Ragsdale, will you give us a roll call, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Jackson?
No.
Mr. Claybrook?
No.
Ms. Baker?
No.
Ms. Skurlock?
No.
Mr. Malazri?
No.
Vice Chair Savage Towns?
No, I find that the standards of 9.22.6 of the UDC are not being met and will be unduly detrimental to the properties in the vicinity.
And Chairman Rainey?
No.
Motion fails.
Motion fails. Thank you all for coming down. We appreciate your time. Mr. Ragsdale, will you call our next case for us, please?
Yes, sir. It's case number 3, BOA 21-161, 2283 Young Avenue.
All right, is the applicant here? All right, I see you. Is there opposition here, I think? Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Skinner, if you want to give us a brief staff report. I know this was held last month, and there's there's been some changes to it, which sort of addressed a lot of the opposition. So if you want to kind of bring us up to speed, that'd be great.
Sure, happy to. Lucas Skinner with the Division of Planning and Development. So this is BOA 2021-161, again at 2283 Young. There are two variances, one for a reduction in lot size for a duplex, and the second is for expanded driveway width to allow that duplex as well. The aerial of the site, this is at the corner of Philadelphia and Young Avenue. Zoning and land use, CMU 1 abuts right up to the known Cooper Young Historic District, but this is not part of the historic district. It's also within the Midtown overlay and has an urban frontage. And as you can see from the land use map, there are sort of a variety of uses, mainly residential, but some commercial in this part of Young Avenue. Some site photos. This was the original structure on the site, has been demolished. These are just from street view. Survey of the lot is around 4,300, exactly 4,371 in terms of square footage. So this is sort of the main bread and butter of this case. We did hold it last month to be a little bit more creative with sort of the driveway on the second plan, or second image, I should say, on the right. So we've gotten the structure to be a little bit smaller, about roughly just shy of 3,000 square feet, 2,980 square feet, and we've gotten parking added to the site. We added the driveway variance to allow for somewhat of a double ribbon driveway, as Mr. Ragsdale very handily crafted, as you can see, his handiwork. But to allow for a more creative driveway, to allow some green space, since there is not a lot with this size of the site. This is a floor plan that we've turned, so that would be Young still to your north in Philadelphia. It's 2-bedroom with an office, and then sort of the main other parts of the dwellings. So in conclusion, again, 2 variances for the lot reduction in size for duplex, as well as a wider driveway width at the right-of-way. Staff is recommending approval with 2 conditions, and I'm available for any questions.
Okay, so just so I'm clear, it would have been allowed on a 5,000 square foot lot to have the stacked duplex, correct?
Correct. In CMU 1, you have to have 5,000 square feet for duplex.
And then just how much parking's required? Is it just 4 spaces that would be required? Or no parking's required. Our issue is there's no parking on the street.
Yes, so it is very unique in that there is no on-street parking. So that's also why we held it, because originally we were looking for more on-site parking since there is no abutting on-street parking.
Okay, all right. Very good. Any questions? Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I asked for this to be pulled off. I have some questions about this application. My first question is, Mr. Skinner, what would the parking requirement be if this building is used as commercial? I mean, isn't it true that it's in a commercial district and there's nothing in what we're doing that would keep them from using it for commercial? Is that true? And what would the parking requirement be?
Correct. However, it is, again, very unique in that there is no on-street parking, and given that the size is 4,300 square feet, it would be very difficult to do a commercial use on this site.
So you're saying that you don't think they'd be able to get an occupancy permit because of the parking requirement? Is that what you're saying?
I believe it would be very difficult, yes, to get both a commercial structure and associated parking on the site.
And so there would be no need for us to make it clear that this is being approved for residential and not for commercial?
I mean, I
you can think about that.
I think the floor plan pretty clearly would illustrate, I mean, given there is an office, but it is, in our eyes, at least from staff's point of view, of residential, just a stacked duplex.
Yeah, but if it's zoned commercial and they can get a permit for commercial, maybe the parking would stop them. What is the setback of the building to the east of this? Is it 20 feet?
It's roughly around that. We've gone through some iterations and moving things around. I believe it's closer to 10 feet. I mean, it's a little hard since that corner towards Young is closer, and so it kind of comes back at an angle.
No. I'm talking about the building to the east of this. The existing building to the east. Is that a 20-foot setback on that building? The one to the east. That's what I'm talking about. It was a home, and now it's some kind of business.
I mean, probably. I'm not certain, but that could be a good assumption, yes.
I thought in the Midtown overlay somewhere there was a requirement for meeting the contextual infill standards if you're in a commercial district in the Midtown overlay, even if you're...
Well, it breaks it down between a residential structure and a commercial structure. So we had some discussions with the applicant in the first iteration of this case as to whether originally it was residential or commercial. Now the applicant definitively gave us a duplex, so we are keeping them to the standards of a residential structure within the Midtown overlay.
So does he have to meet contextual infill standards relative to the setback or not? That's my question. Because
Yes,
he obviously is not. I mean, that's 15 feet of a difference between that building to the east. I mean, he's 5 feet from that line. So that house is going to be, or it's now a business, but it's going to be back in the shade, really. 15 feet, I think.
Yes, but we would be more concerned about a front setback and not necessarily a side.
That is what I'm talking about, front setback. From Cooper. Right?
Well, their front setback is along Young, so...
I'm sorry, Young. That's what I'm talking about. Not Philadelphia, Young.
Well, right. We're just more concerned about keeping them in line along Young. If they have extra space on the side, that's not necessarily a problem with us.
I guess I'm not communicating. He's going to 5 feet from the Young property line, the back of the sidewalk, 5 feet until you get to his building. But the building to the east, is it 20 feet back?
That's
my question.
I'm measuring like 7 feet.
You think it is
Yeah, I
not?
think it's way less than 20. I mean, just looking at that lot's only 90 feet long. And that's just that's just a very small amount of shadow there that's not the front of those houses compared to, I'm just like dividing 100 into 20, it's definitely not 1/5 of the lot.
Okay, so it's not 20 feet back.
I think they're going to be fairly close to being the same distance from the street.
Okay.
Maybe 2 feet, if that.
Required ground floor transparency is 20% on a residential building.
Correct.
There's no dimensions or anything on these drawings, but if you look at that side of that building on Philadelphia, I don't think it has 20% transparency. And there's a big blank space there that, according to the note, he's saying is going to be some kind of mural. And so, I just find that unusual, and wouldn't that be another variance that he doesn't, area where he doesn't meet the regulations?
I mean, we thought that they were meeting 20% transparent. We felt
How
that
would you know if you don't have any dimensions or anything?
They have a building permit put on for this site that this is how this variance came about, was from a building permit. So we've done a zoning review based on the building permit, which the elevations on this slide came from. If there is some concern, we can have them go through the administrative site plan review process to ensure that they meet every single requirement. But we felt based on where we are now, that they do meet the requirements for the Midtown overlay.
If I may, Mr. Skinner, Ms. Baker, as
Yes.
Mr. Skinner mentioned, it did come through for a permit review, which our office is now doing zoning ASPR reviews for all commercial and residential permits. And so this will be required to meet the overlay. And if it does not, then they would have to come back through here to get a variance for that. So at this point, we did mention in the conditions the urban frontage on Young, but they would also have to meet all the other, what was the condition exactly? Let's see.
To ensure.
Yeah, we just mentioned the urban frontage in condition 2, but they would actually have to meet all of the Midtown overlay. And if they are not at 20%, then they would have to come back and request a variance before they can move forward for that, or make it 20%.
Well, I just find this big blank area on that elevation facing Philadelphia to be, I'm surprised that you feel comfortable with it, to tell you the truth. And then my other thing that really bothers me about this is the way they have just cocked the building on the site rather than aligning it with the property boundaries. I mean, isn't that customary for siting a building on a site to respect the alignment with the property boundaries? I know you said he wants to do something unusual, but unless there's a good reason for it, I think he should respect the site and the character of the area and put that building on that site where it lines up with the property lines. I mean, that's just how I feel about it. And I'm surprised that you don't agree with it, but I'm just going to say one other thing about this case, and I guess I'm just really on this case, but I can't help it. The way this parking situation was resolved is to just make the parking spaces 18 feet long each. And then that means you got the 10-foot setback, from the street. But, a lot of times people aren't that good at parking. They might not pull up all that far. And so, this, I think that parking arrangement is going to be troublesome over time. And as the letters from the neighbors said, there's already a problem with traffic congestion and so forth in this area. So I guess what I would say on this is that I would like to add a condition to this application that the building align with the property boundaries. And I would like to see something different than a big blank area on the side of the building to Philadelphia. That's just my thoughts about it. And I would like to add a condition that this is a residential-only building, not approved for commercial. Those are my conditions that I'd like to add if the board members.
What was the second one that you said? I have the line building with property line, and then the residential only. What was the middle one? What had to do with was that the blank space? Was there a condition on that?
That the large blank area be removed from the Philadelphia elevation of the building.
Okay, I got those written down, so we'll talk about those in discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff before we move to the applicant?
Yeah, I got a question. What is it currently zoned?
CMU 1, isn't it?
CMU 1.
Okay.
Okay. If the applicant will come forward. If you could, why don't you go ahead and both give your names and addresses for the record? We'll just swear you both in.
Yeah, it's Will Wheel, and the address is 1057 Waring Road.
Okay. Yeah.
Got my office address or personal?
Either one. Office is
My name
fine.
is Joshua Belair. I'm the architect, and my office is at 1378 Union.
Okay. Do y'all both swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, go ahead.
Part of my job is to not only try and create some artistic expressions for buildings, but to also look to the future of what's happening in the context of where the project lies. And in this case, we tried to analyze the fact that we're in the Cooper Young Arts District, and it is more of an eclectic culture. And we're also looking to the future of the sports complex one block away at the fairgrounds. So part of the concept for the arrangement of the building was that it could become a gateway between the sports complex and the Cooper Young Arts District. And I don't know, Ms. Baker, if you saw that rendering, but it's not a blank wall. We're planning to commission a local artist to do an installation on that wall and create a mural to further signify the artistic nature of this neighborhood. And as people leave Cooper Young and go towards the complex on Parkway, they'll be left with this vision, this icon, as they leave that district. And vice versa, as they come from the sports complex in the Parkway area and they traverse Young Avenue, they'll see this building gestured towards them in an more artistic expression to create and further signify this idea of a gateway linking the two somewhat currently disparate districts. So the building is angled that way to gesture one way east towards the sports complex. It's got a very small portion perfectly aligned with Young Avenue to gesture towards the street. And then the west facade is angled so that potentially when you're even standing on the corner of Cooper and Young and you look down Young Avenue, it's angled like that so that mural could potentially be visible from that corner. And as you walk down the street towards the other restaurants and businesses, this mural will start to reveal itself from out behind that apartment complex and just further enhance the artistic eclecticism and the nature of this cultural district. Another thing we'd like to point out is this is designed to only be a residential structure, even though we are completely surrounded by commercial uses on every side. Even the multifamily apartment building across the street is considered a commercial use. But those tandem parking spaces in the back, we worked very diligently with Brett and Lucas to design something that made sense to be able to build a duplex and still park on the property because there is no legal on-street parking in and around that site. So Mr. Ragsdale presented a very sensible solution to that, and we adopted that and incorporated it into that site plan that you saw and reduced the footprint. And we also abut an R6 district, so we have to have that class 3 buffer. We incorporated that on the south side of the property line, so you'll have that brick masonry wall, some trees, and a grass buffer before you get to those parking spaces, which would also have grass strips within them. We just haven't incorporated that into the construction documents yet because it didn't make any sense to spend that time and money revising the construction documents until we got your approval for the project to move forward.
Okay. Any other comments or you have questions of the applicant? Okay, so you have a total of 5:39 left, so it'd give you 7.5 minutes of rebuttal time.
Say that last part again, I'm sorry.
You only used like 4 minutes and 20 seconds, so you could reserve that for rebuttal if you want to.
That's fine.
Okay, very good. And so we have one piece of opposition. So if y'all want to take a seat, and then we'll come back.
Thank you.
Mr. Durkin? If you go ahead and give your name and address for the record for me.
Patrick Durkin, 935 Bruce Street.
Okay, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
Just want to know, I live across the street from this place on Bruce Street. So there's Philadelphia and Bruce, and I can see this from my backyard. I do want to just take a moment to thank the staff for trying to work some things out from the last month's renderings. And their due diligence spent looking at the property. And I do appreciate the developer's willingness to work with the staff, but I just don't think that we're there. There's still more to go. And I really do appreciate Ms. Baker's comments. You're totally on point with what I'm thinking here. What this really comes down to is this proposed development is still way too large for this property. It is so big that they even had to put it at an angle to try to make it fit. Although the applicant has added 4 parking spaces, they really haven't. Looking at the new plan, the proposed tandem parking solution is unrealistic for a duplex. One car could potentially block in the other residence. I know if I lived there, I would not park in this driveway as it is not a viable solution. This whole area is basically a no parking zone. There is no parking allowed on the entire south side of Young Avenue from East Parkway to Mita, over 5 blocks long. Additionally, there is no parking allowed on the entire east side of Philadelphia from Southern to Nelson, which is 4 very long blocks. If you stand in front of this property, you will immediately see a no parking sign. That is 2 major joining intersections that both do not allow parking on either ends of the street. New construction needs to be able to accommodate its own parking as outlined by the UDC. Although there are 4 parking spaces on paper, there are not 4 parking spaces in reality, as tandem parking with 16-foot wide driveway will not accommodate the actual use of all 4 spaces. Allowing this new structure to have unviable parking and encouraging tenants to park on the street would be a mistake to the neighborhood because once again, there is no parking in this area. And additionally, there's a reason the UDC calls for a minimum square footage of 5,000 square feet for a 2-family house. This is a 2-story apartment complex with 3 bedrooms on each floor. Changing the name from bedroom 3 to office doesn't change the fact that this is nothing more than a double-stacked duplex that does not fit this area. This structure boasts almost 3,000 square feet on less than a 5,000 square foot property, which is extreme. A historic Cooper Young bungalow was recently demolished for this property, and while this isn't under landmarks, so I know there's no coming back from that, but if this is the direction we're going to take, let's not demolish a structure built for residential purposes with another larger structure built for residential purposes. Let's think more of ground floor retail, walkability purposes that supports the neighborhood. That blank wall, let's think windows, not murals. I urge the developer to build something that fits within the neighborhood and more importantly, fits the scale of the small lot next to the other 3 historic homes left on this street that do not require a variance. I ask the board to reject this application and push for a design that fits better for all and aligns with development standards. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Mr. Durkin? All right. We'll go, unless there's other opposition, we'll go back to the applicant. You have 7 minutes and 39 seconds.
I appreciate and respect Mr. Durkin's comments. I guess we could start with the macro and go down to the micro. If you look at the streetscape of that whole section of Young Avenue, you've got this monstrous multifamily development across Philadelphia Street from us. If you think about it in architectural terms, you've got this huge apartment building and a little tiny bungalow. You used to have this little tiny bungalow right across the street. This is an attempt to create a gradient and not such a big disparity between the two sizes of those different buildings. If you go back to the rendering that can show that corner of the apartment building there, you see how we're not quite as tall as the apartment building, and we're probably almost the same height as the business, which is in a bungalow, but almost the same height as the business next door. So we don't have as many roof lines as the business next door because we're going for that more artistic and contemporary aesthetic, but the scale is, in our minds, from a design perspective, a sensible step down from the big multifamily building. Another comment about the scale is the reason it is what it is because the UDC has those requirements for a 14-foot ground level height, and it has to be a minimum of 18 inches above finished grade. If those requirements weren't there, then we probably wouldn't be as tall as we are proposing. But those are to meet current UDC standards. And then we have the upper level, which I think has a 10-foot height requirement. And then we've got a small parapet around the top for the low slope roof. And that low slope roof and the parapet is in keeping with the context of the other commercial buildings around us and the apartment building across the street. So we feel strongly that we are in perfect keeping with the context and the nature of the surrounding buildings and the culture of the neighborhood by creating an opportunity for a local artist to have an installation here in the Arts District. And if you would please, I think I need to address one other of his comments regarding the driveway. If you go to that site plan. The one on the left was my sketch for the revised site plan, and I had initially done that 16-foot wide drive apron because that's what the UDC dictated the maximum driveway width could be. And then to accommodate the 10-foot wide parking spaces, I flared it out so that northernmost car could drive in around the southern cars and get into those parking spaces. I was very pleased when Brett sent us this site plan that proposed we widen that to 20 feet because obviously that gives us more room for everybody to get in and out without having to turn. And then an 18-foot deep stall is just pretty typical for any parking space. So we feel like that should be acceptable and in keeping with UDC guidelines. I guess the only other thing I would need to say is regarding his comments on the size of the building, which we already addressed somewhat. This site is so compact and minimized naturally and has these parameters such as the buffers and the setbacks. Even if it was a single family residence, you can see in the floor plan, if you want to have an urban style front porch and you want 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, a living, a dining room, it doesn't even have a dining room, honestly. There's an island in the kitchen that people are going to eat on. Because the site is so compact, we had to basically condense those spaces. But you've got a living, dining, kitchen, laundry room on the west side, and you've got 2 bedrooms, And who doesn't nowadays want a separate small personal office space or a study, if you want to call it that? And then you got a bathroom behind it, which are almost the bare essentials of any dwelling unit. So you've got very modestly sized spaces in a very compact and efficient arrangement in almost the only way it could occur on this site if you want something built there. If it was one story, it would have the same floor plan and take up the exact same amount of footprint. We're just trying to maximize the site in keeping with UDC and Memphis 3.0 and try and enhance density. So we wanted to add another level to it if we could. Another thing is the east setback between us and that adjacent commercial building. Per UDC, if it's a commercial property, there is a 0-foot setback requirement. So, but we didn't want to build up to the property line, which we could have, or any commercial structure could and probably would to maximize their by right allowable footprint. But we wanted to keep a little more space and green space and buffer between us and the neighbor to the east. So we thought we were being very neighborly in doing so.
I have a question for you real quick. There's been some talk about the fact that it's kind of cocked on the site. If you straightened it, are you trying to stay away from the northwest corner? Because if you straightened it, couldn't you just still have those setback lines and actually have a little more space? Or are we trying to, if those setback lines that I'm seeing on there are correct and there's no sight line issues, it could actually be bigger than it is if it was straight. Would that be accurate?
The building could be bigger if we straighten it out, but we don't want it to be because of cost of construction.
Sure.
Having to pay for that additional square footage. We didn't want to put any bigger of a building on this if we could help it on that site because of the context. And again, we're just trying to make an iconic artistic expression by gesturing to the east, to the sports complex development, and gesturing to the arts district. We've got that mural that's going to be lit from above at night and grounded with some plantings in that built-in planter. So it's a very elegant and artistic expression that we think can be an icon for the district and the city.
Okay, that's kind of what I thought. I was just making sure I understood geometry or saw it correctly. Any other questions?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I've got a question. So just kind of restate that. So it's not so much that the site is tight, it's very intentional with the orientation of the building. So even though it's a bigger site, most likely you would still orient the building the same way. Is that a fair statement?
If we're allowed to, yeah, to make that expression, sure.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Where is your garbage receptacle going to be?
We discussed making space for it on the end of the driveway between those two trees, or there's room for it on the north side of something that hasn't been mentioned, the bicycle parking, the bike rack, which could easily be screened.
What's required on something like this? Is it a dumpster, or do you just have regular roll-out Herbie-Kirby's like the rest of us do?
The latter, yes. So we would try our best to create an elegant solution for that and have a wood screen fence around the two bins.
What is that row of whatever that is that I guess is at the base of that big blank space? What, a row of some kind of shrubs or something? What is the purpose of that?
To add some vegetation to the site and the building. create more of a base for the mural, to have some greenery at the base of it, liven up that corner a little bit. Could you go to the rendering? Thank you.
On this.
And one last thing, sorry, but
Go ahead.
something that didn't make it into this presentation a couple months ago, I guess, month and a half maybe, we had produced a diagram that showed how we would address the transparency requirement, and it did so successfully. I think we ended up with 22% transparency on the Young Avenue side and just over 21% on the, maybe more. But we at least exceeded the minimum on both Young Avenue and Philadelphia Street.
Any other questions?
If this is approved and we're able to continue with the construction documents, that will be incorporated into the design.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
If we could have somebody so we can discuss, move to approve BOA 20-21-161 as conditioned by staff.
So move.
Second.
Okay, moving second. Other thoughts?
Well, you know, if this were an important civic building or something like that, you know, like an auditorium or something, you know, it's like a duplex, and it's so, you know, self-important that it has a big blank area that, you know, is, to me, it just seems, you know, I'm afraid that we're about to approve a building and a placement on the site and so on, you know, because, you know, of this idea about artistic expression and modernism and all that, which I'm not opposed to. But at the same time, I think there's some basic rules about how a community develops. And the lots are mainly rectangular, and the buildings, you know, try to have the same rhythm along the street, and they're, you know, placed in a certain area on the front, and, you know, there are rules about this in planning, and I just believe that this is too much of a violation of it, and we don't know how it's going to turn out, and I also believe that it overbuilds the site. I mean, just, you know, when you think about it, well, where are we going to, you're going to have to thread, you don't not only have those tandem spaces that are going to be difficult, but now you got to thread the herby-kirby through there, you know, all the time. And I would hope that we would at least require this building to acknowledge the pattern of the placement of the buildings in this neighborhood. And I would rather, and I guess it's too late maybe for this one, but you know, when we get a case here, I'd rather have it the way it's going to be rather than we approve something and then it goes for administrative review and, you know, we don't have anything to do with that. So that's my feeling about it. I think it's too much for the site, and I'd rather not approve it, but I sense that other board members want to approve it, but I would hope that we would at least line the thing up on the site like it's supposed to be and not let them cock it like that because of artistic expression. That's just my opinion.
Here's what I'm thinking. Let's get some more thoughts. And then as we add those, we can then vote maybe individually what conditions we want to add after we.
That's fine.
That's
fine.
Okay.
Or I'm happy to, you know, if other board members don't agree with me, then that's fine. I'll just drop it. But I'm hoping that, you know, at the very least, we can have this building fit in with the rhythm of the placement of the buildings in this neighborhood. That's it. So however you want to vote on it, it's fine.
Okay, other thoughts?
Yeah, okay. I'm not as opposed with the mural. I get realigning the building. There is a large commercial structure right across the street. So, this is, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on what you think, it kind of seems like the direction of this neighborhood. I can't get on board with downzoning it, making it just a residential structure. There's so much commercial in this area. I mean, clearly, from what they're saying and what it looks like, it's going to be hard to convert it to a commercial structure after this anyway. So those are my thoughts.
Mr. Jackson?
I kind of like it is, but Ms. Baker, I see your point about, at a minimum at least, squaring the building up to the street. I think the mural's a really good idea. The parking perspective, I just think they made the best of a worse situation. Pretty creative from that perspective. I understand the architect's aspect of, you got a single-story, residential structure here, and you got a multi-story, multi-family structure here, and to create this, kind of downsize. If it's possible to lower that building 2 feet by reducing the floor height from 14 feet, I think on the first floor you mentioned, to 12 foot, if we could do that, I think would reduce the height of the structure a little bit and give it a little bit more transition. But, I'll vote with Ms. Baker on straightening the building and keep the parking and keep the mural. And if we could reduce it 2 foot in height, I'd be pretty good with that.
I think I'm in agreement with that. I'm not offended by the cock of it, but I'm not offended by not doing that. You know what I mean?
I thought 14 was for commercial, and that the residential would not require 14. Is that right?
Yes, it's 11 for residential on the first floor and 10 above. So it will be shorter.
Okay.
But do we need to condition it to be shorter? Because, do I have to, if I'm building residential, couldn't I build it 15 feet if I wanted to? It's just, maybe I don't want to? As opposed to, it's not required to be 11, it just can't be lower than 11.
Correct.
Okay, so if we wanted it lower, we would need to put some sort of condition to lower it. Okay,
Yes.
Just wanted to make sure. Go ahead, Ms. Savage Towns.
I was just in agreement with you and Mr. Jackson on, I'm not offensive to the position that it's being presented. I'll go along with straightening it, and will vote as well in support of lowering the floors. I think that would help kind of give it the flow that would make it substantial. My take.
Any other thoughts before we start digging into conditions?
I agree with Carson that no down zoning, that it remains what is zoned. And then also, I like the transition cop. They literally, we talk so often about pedestrian friendly and all that. He's got bike racks, and then it invites you to walk the corner versus hitting it like a straight regular commercial building. If you're walking along there and you see it opening up, you want to walk toward the opening. It's not a invitation to drive it. It's not a street there, so it's an invitation to walk it. But I'm agreeable to lowering the height.
Okay. All right, so let's start talking conditions. First off,
I'll say mine's gonna be a condition. So.
Okay, go.
was thinking, if we're going to talk about straightening out the building, then the encroachment on the side yard setback to allow the planter garden to encroach into that area, I think would be one of the conditions.
Okay. Would, Mr. Skinner, would that planter area that's part of the structure, does that need, or can it encroach like a chimney could? I know like in a normal residential, a bay window, chimneys usually don't have to do with the setbacks. How would that apply here? Do we need to make a statement on that?
No, a planter can encroach.
Okay,
great.
Yeah, great thought. Okay, so let's start with, let's discuss or just vote on whether or not we need to make any sort of, hey, this is a residential structure. I think we have a board member that would like to. We have two that have expressed like, no, just let them use it how they can. It's either going to be able to use, they're going to have to drastically change it, sorry, Mary, to be able to use it as commercial. It's just not set up to be able to do it. Like it wouldn't, they couldn't get a permit to do it. So it's whether or not we need to put a restriction on something we think is somewhat already out of the, I know we don't normally like to put a lot of restrictions if we think it's not possible. So do you want to do a voice vote on that? On whether or not we want to, so it would be whether or not we want to add a restriction that it be solely a residential structure. All right, we got 3 no's already. Okay, so just from shake of heads, I think we're going to leave that one alone.
Okay.
Okay. Aligning the building to be, perpendicular, and parallel to the streets, however you would say that. Thoughts? I see some nods. Yes. Is there anybody that just you want to keep it?
Yes.
Okay. You want to keep it as it is, as opposed to having a requirement to do that? Yeah. Okay. Carson? Yeah. It's a tough one. I mean, like, I normally honestly don't like structures like this, and I actually like this one. But I hear what you're saying. I think Ms. Trask made a good remark on how it opens that corner up, and it wouldn't be open like that. So I'd be, right now we have 3, I guess 4 and 3 against. I think I would let it stay. I mean, if I don't like being the guy that decides anything, and I'm not, but we can, but if somebody wants to add it, we can. But right now it's 4-3 on that. Ms. Baker had mentioned removal of the space with the mural on it. I know we had some support for the mural. Is there anybody wanting to remove the mural? Okay, I'm not seeing the ability to do that. And then how about our height of the bottom floor? Would you want to be 12? You'd mentioned it before, Mr. Jackson. They're allowed 11.
That's a maximum of 12.
Maximum of 12, yeah. Okay. Any thoughts on that? Okay. All right, so it looks, so from what I have, unless there's something else, the only condition we're adding would be that the bottom floor of the structure would have a maximum ceiling height of 12, or not, is it ceiling height? Maximum ceiling height of 12.
I believe it's floor to floor. They're always slightly different, but you can condition it however you want to. So
I just don't want to say like total height if like ceiling is already a foot down or something like that. I just want to make sure I'm using the right.
I think it's probably the way you guys are thinking about it, probably floor to floor would be the best. Floor to floor of 12 is adequate.
Floor to floor 12, okay. Yeah. All right, so maximum floor to floor height of 12 on the ground floor. Any discussion? Okay, I assume you're ready to vote. Mr. Ragsdale, will you give us a roll call vote, please?
Ms. Scurlock?
Yes.
Mr. Malazri?
Yes.
Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Ms. Claybrook? Mr.
Yes.
Claybrook? Ms. Baker?
No.
Vice Chair Savage Jones?
Yes, I find that the standards of 9.22.6 of the UDC are being met and are not unduly detrimental to the properties in the vicinity.
Chairman Rainey?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, it's been approved as conditioned. Will you call the next case for us, Mr. Ragsdale?
Yes, sir. Next case is item number 4, BOA 21-162, 7175 Ward Road.
All right, do we have, so it's a rejection. Is there any opposition to this case? Seeing none. And is Ms. Shelton here?
She had to run out for just a minute, so she'll be right back. So we have a little bit of a break if everybody just wants to.
Okay.
Relax for a minute.
Oh, can we uncall this case and move to number 12? Since we don't need.
No, that's a great idea.
Okay.
Unless Mr. Malazri needed to.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm good.
Okay, yes, Mr. Chairman. So the next case is item number 12, BOA 21-163, 562 South Edgewood Street. And this is the petition for the rehearing.
Okay, this is a petition for the rehearing. And so we don't have to hear anything today if we don't want to. I know that Ms. Baker wanted to discuss it, which we would be happy to do. What were your thoughts on it?
Well, I may have misunderstood what
Okay.
you were asking for. I thought you were asking for, are we going to discuss whether we'll rehear it or not?
I was. No,
Oh, okay.
you understood correctly. Like,
Okay.
if everybody's like, my
Not
mind's.
getting into the details of.
Yeah. So
Okay.
go. Did you have any immediate thoughts on it?
Well, yeah, I mean, I would like to rehear it. I noticed in the material that was provided from the neighbor who asked to rehear it, indicated that there were statements made, as to they had talked to the neighbors and so forth, but that was not the case and, could have influenced some of the votes of the board. I didn't go back and listen to that hearing. I don't know if any of the staff did or not, but I would also point out that we were at the very tail end of a very long meeting, and we were all exhausted, and I'm just thinking that we maybe didn't spend as much time on that case as we might have. For example, Ms. Skurlock mentioned the balconies, and I think that it may have been something that we should have looked at because, those balconies are facing into the single-family home next door, including into the backyard. It doesn't have to be that way. It could be a duplex on the front of the site, put together as duplexes normally are. And then it would be more compatible with the single-family dwelling next to it. There was something else that I was thinking about, but anyway, to me, it's worth at least looking at again because no problem with it being a duplex at all. But I just believe that, and if you go and look at that neighborhood, I know we were talking about, well, there's been a lot of infill in there that's not in character and so forth anyway, and it has. But now new homes are being built in there that are in character. The property values are going up, and I just think that this is an opportunity to support that move in a positive direction. And one other thing, it just came back to me. I think that this site would have to conform to contextual infill because the property across the street has a front porch and the property next door has a front porch. And so it only requires 2 buildings that have front porches to require a front porch. And I don't believe the structure does. So those would be my reasons. And I would just like to at least give us an opportunity to look at it fresh when we're not exhausted and to really think about whether we could, and time for the applicant to meet with the neighborhood. We might be able to come up with a building that would support further improvement in the neighborhood. That's it.
Well said, well said. Other thoughts? Mr. Jackson?
I agree.
We got two in agreement. Okay, so let's vote on whether or not we want to rehear in March. So, Mr. Ragsdale, will you give us a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Mr. Malazari?
Yes.
Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Mr. Claiborne?
Yes.
Mr. Baker? Ms. Baker? Ms. Baker?
Yes.
Sorry about that. Ms. Scurlock?
Yes.
Vice Chair Savage Jones?
Yes.
And Chairman Rainey?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, so the rehearing's been approved. That's when we'll actually have another hearing. I will say, I still feel pretty good about how we decided before, but I think Mary brings up some really good points on things we can look at the next time through, because we were 5 hours in at that point or something like that. So, okay, if we could go back to the case we had started on there, Mr. Ragsdale,
Yes,
or we're
sir.
trying to start. Ms. Shelton's here.
Item number 4, BOA 21-162, 7175 Ward Road.
All right, Ms. Shelton, if you'll give us a staff report on this.
Good evening. I know everybody's tired, so I'm going to make this very brief. We have before you case number BOA 21-162. Owner and applicant is Esteban Oneto. Representative is Tim McCaskill with Reeves Firm. The variance is a request from subsection 2.7.2D to allow 2 accessory dwelling units and a principal structure on 4.4 acres in the CA zoning district. Here's just an aerial view showing you the principal structure, and this is where the 2 dwelling units are located or potentially located here. This is the land use map just showing that it's residential. Here are some photos of the accessory dwelling units that are already in existence on the property. This is just showing you the Unit 2, which is closest to the street. Let me go back. This one is Unit 1, which is closest to the barn, so it actually sits behind the front facet of the principal structure. This one sits out a little bit further, as you can see here, located on the site plan. Here is a citation that was given to Mr. Esteban back in August on the 12th, August 21st, for failure to obtain a building permit for those dwelling units. In my conclusion, the applicant is seeking to get relief to allow 2 accessory dwelling units in a principal structure. Unified Development Code only permits 1 accessory dwelling unit. See the subsection 2.2D in the UDC. Just reiterating that on August 12, 2021, Memphis and Shelby County Office of Construction Enforcement issued a courtesy warning citation to Mr. Esteban Oneto for failure to obtain a building permit for the 2 accessory dwelling units on the property located at 7175 Ward Road. There's no hardship or practical difficulties presented by the applicant that justifies approving this variance. Staff is recommending rejection. However, if it's approved by the board, the following conditions will apply. On the second one is important. If approved, the accessory dwelling unit must be located behind the front facet of the principal structure, no exception. I'm here for any questions if you have.
All right. Are there any questions for Ms. Shelton or staff? Mr. Jackson.
Ms. Shelton, in the neighborhood around this piece of property, are there any other tracts of land that have multiple dwelling units on that acreage that you know of?
I didn't see any in looking in the area view and just kind of searching as much as I could, just looking from a Google Street View. I did not see any. I know that they can have an accessory dwelling unit, but they also have to meet the guidelines in the UDC, and of course, they have to meet the building code regulations.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, any other questions of staff? All right, Mr. McCaskill, you want to come talk to us? If you'll give your name and address for the record.
Tim McCaskill, 6800 Poplar Avenue.
All right, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
Mr. Onetto, the owner of this property, he's immigrated here from Italy, and what he wants to do, as Italians tend to do, is to keep their extended family close by. So he wants to build these two structures for his daughters to live in. He actually hired a contractor to construct these buildings, and then when he got cited by the code enforcement, he found out the contractor had not pulled permits. So he stopped immediately. All of these buildings are right now in a shell. They have no heating, air conditioning, plumbing, electrical, nothing. They're just there. If he gets approved today for this, the first place he's going is code enforcement, to get his building permit so he can resume construction. I think that the unusual characteristics of this property are that it's 800 feet deep and over 4 acres. These buildings are set back almost halfway to the rear. The principal structure is 400 feet back, and the closest structure to the street is 350 feet back. This is a photo that doesn't show up in the staff report taken from Ward Road. If you can see it, to the left of the sun is the principal structure, and to the right you see the white building over there that's set back 350 feet. If this gets approved, we would like to remove condition 2 because in the UDC section 2.7.2A4, an accessory structure is permitted to be set forward from the principal structure as long as it's more than 100 feet back from the street right away.
Could you give me that? Do you mind giving me the UDC again? Your site?
I'm sorry, what?
Could you give me your UDC site again? The which it was like 2.84? Is that
2.7.2A4.
A4. Okay, all right, go ahead.
Did you want me to read it to you?
If you have it right there, you can. If not, I was going to have staff look it up.
I have it right here.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, you said it's 2.7.2A?
A4, yes.
A4. It says in a single-family, open and residential zoning district, no accessory structure shall be located within the front yard. Flagpoles, bird baths, statues, and similar ornamental features are exempt. See also subsection 3.2.9E, encroachments. Barns and other related accessory structures may be located in front of the primary residence, provided that such structures are at least 100 feet from the right-of-way, and the subject site is at least 4 acres in size. But I guess my question to that is, and I'm going to ask Mr. Ragsdale, we're talking about accessory dwelling unit. So is that considered the same? Would that fall the same?
We do look at accessory dwelling units because it does have a separate section, but it is an accessory structure. So I do believe that this would apply to that. I think the answer is yes. Accessory dwelling units have their own section and their own requirements, but this would also apply to it.
Okay.
I just wanted to be clear.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Okay, go ahead, sir.
In my opinion, this one should have a positive recommendation. These buildings are set so far back, nobody's hardly going to see them. They're not offending anybody. He's just trying to keep his family close by, and I hope you see that and recommend approval.
How many square feet are the buildings, roughly?
They're each 560 square feet each.
Okay, and it has like a sleeping loft? Is that what
Yeah, it's a living room, kitchen, bathroom on the bottom floor, and a loft bedroom upstairs.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, is the intention to have the family live there full-time, or is it just when they come in?
No, full-time, and Mr. Onetto has told me that these will never be rented. There'll only be family members that live there, as long as he's there.
Thank you.
Other thoughts? I was already thinking about, when you said that, a condition that they're not rentals. You know, so I think we're going to probably add a condition for that.
He has no problem with that.
Yeah, okay. Any other questions? Okay. All right, I assume you guys are ready to vote. If we can get a motion on the table to approve BOA 21-162 as conditioned by staff, but removing condition 2, which is not required per the UDC? I guess we could require whatever we want to, though, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
That's right.
We'll leave it in and we'll discuss that. Okay, so as conditioned by staff.
So move.
Second.
All right, any discussion?
I don't have a problem with the structures because of their size being in front of the principal structure and the side is turned to them.
Yeah.
And the fact that they're 300 feet away from the road, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think that's a big issue at all.
I agree.
Ever, I know that he's building them to this size, but would there ever be a point where they're adding homes?
I mean, they would have to get a building permit to add. So, but would we need to put a condition on, like, I guess, like, give them a building permit? You know, it doesn't have anything to do with us. Would we want to keep them a certain, like, not to expand?
Right, because, you know, if they're moving in and family members, if I get another family member and they have 6 kids, do I add, you know, keep building on and on? So,
Yeah.
you know, I just.
So, no. No expansion. Okay, so let me ask y'all this. Is there a problem on the board with removing condition 2 as to the, making it behind the principal structure?
I don't see where that would be necessary.
So far away.
Yeah.
So I think that you gave us our second, so we'll make our friendly amendments, I guess, and then we'll redo it. I would like to add 2 conditions. One, that there'd be no expansion of the size of those units, and 2, that they would not be able to be used for rental purposes. And I think we're probably all in agreement and can add those and remove number 2 by friendly amendment with our mover and our seconder.
Are we saying rental and or commercial or?
I don't think that they can do commercial there anyway. Yeah, they could rent property there though. Any other comments before we vote? Hearing none, Mr. Ragsdale, will you give us a roll call, please?
Yes, sir. Ms. Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Claybrook?
Yes.
Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Mr. Malazari?
Yes.
Ms. Scurlock?
Yes.
Vice Chair Savage Jones?
Yes, I find that the standards of 9.22.6 of the UDC are being met and are not unduly detrimental to the properties in the vicinity.
And Chairman Rainey?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, you've been approved as condition. Thank you much, sir. Thank you. All right, Mr. Ragsdale, that's all our cases, correct?
That's correct.
Oh, thank you. Do you have any further announcements?
I do not.
All right, with that, then we are adjourned until March.